So let's get into these steps. First, secure the crime scene. Now remember, we're mobile at this point. I mean, this is part of the crime scene. It could be that somebody's carrying 2 different devices or more. So what we want to do is we don't want to allow a handoff to somebody else outside of the crime scene itself. So we're going to restrict the unauthorized persons. No, you can't go over there and talk to him or her. You're not allowed to do that. Stay beyond the tape. Don't let them throw one into the crowd. So then when you're in that crime scene, you secure all those devices. You need to actually do the pat down if on law enforcement you're finding these phones. Now these phones are smaller and smaller these days, and so you're really going to have to search for them in a lot of cases. Once you achieve it, once you acquire that phone, once you seize it, you want to maintain its integrity. The easiest way to do that is as soon as it's from that particular person. If you have the ability to do the physical forensics on it, that's great. If not, place it in a Faraday cage for a moment in time, or a Faraday bag. And then when you have it there inside of that Faraday cage or Faraday bag, take digital photographs of the scene and the evidence. Remember, you're photographing this phone. One of the problems that we run into is people say, well, you damaged my phone. So you want to know, as soon as you get a hold of the phone, you want to take pictures of it. Remember, these phones are going to be inside of cases in a lot of instances. And so it may be that you want to take the case apart, and you have to be careful with that because some people have a broken phone that they're holding together with the case. But what's inside, by the way, inside of the case in a lot of cases is some sort of password or some sort of mechanism so that they can remember how to get into this phone if they forget. There's little notes inside the little storage bins inside of these things. It happens all the time. So we're going to photograph the scene and the evidence. A little bit more on the securing the crime scene. We need to sketch this. We need to sketch the scene itself. Now, the mobile phones aren't really a focused part of this, but we still have to say, okay, well, there's the person in relation to what we have in front of us. A good thing to sketch or figure out or document in the scene is what is the closest cell tower. I have an app on my iPhone that actually informs me of the closest 3 cell towers, and I can make notations for that on my particular phone. This is where we're starting the chain of custody, and we're going to maintain this throughout all 8 steps. If you need to do the interviews at that point, that's when you would collect up the information from them. And now what you want to do is you want to prepare a search plan. So in most cases in law enforcement, they know the order of these things, and what they can do is they can ask for things. Let's go to that next part where we seize the evidence. If you're seizing evidence, is it damaged? Did they take the phone, throw it on the ground, and stomp on it? Collect up all those little tiny pieces, because it may be that they pulled out the SIM card on the ground and they threw the SIM card away. They think that if I toss this out of here, this piece is no good and this piece is no good. We know if we can assemble it correctly, but that means that we're going to have to reassemble this, and we're going to have to note down all the serial numbers and everything else. Also, don't be handling it with your hands. Use gloves, use evidence bags when you're doing your proper search. Your seize. Now you're preserving the evidence. Again, keep on maintaining that chain of custody. Label the evidence containers that you have. Usually what we'll do is we'll either have a Faraday cage, a Faraday bag. In some cases we've got a Faraday box, which is kind of nice, where you can put the mobile device in it and you can look through a window and you can manipulate the device. This also allows for cabling, and we'll get to the cabling problems. Just one second. So label the evidence containers and maintain the current power state. This phone, the battery is out of it, so the current power state is off. That's nice. We don't have to put it in a Faraday cage. So then we take it back to the forensics lab and we maintain it. This has the power on. How much power is left with this, and do we need to start charging this device to maintain the current power for it? Now, remember I said we're going to put this in a Faraday cage or a Faraday bag. How are we going to get the cable in there to keep it charged? You've got to think through that process. If you've got one of what are called the Faraday boxes, where it's just a big lead-lined box or copper-lined box, and you put your hands inside of it, you may slide the cable in there to charge this. So we put the iPhone inside of there, and we say, okay, we're going to run the cable in to actually keep this, maintain the energy state on this, because if it dies, we may not be able to get back into it. So preserving the evidence also means preserving its current power state. We did this with computers. We do it with mobile devices, but the problem with mobile devices is you need a million different kinds of connectors that are out there. Acquire the information. Okay, before the acquisition, during the acquisition, and then afterward. Those are the kind of the steps in the acquisition. We're going to break those three down. Before acquisition, identify the device. So figure out the serial numbers on that particular device. This one doesn't have any exposed serial numbers on the back. This one's got a nice big barcode on it. Take a picture of the barcode. Check the battery depletion, see if the battery is available. Note what kind of battery. If they actually pull the battery out of the phone, they put it on the ground and they stomp on it, note the battery and all the information on that. You may need to plug that battery in, get another battery to get this thing up and running when you get back to the lab. Create a connection to the device if you need to. That would be that physical connection within your Faraday box or Faraday bag. And then after you've acquired the data off of it, we'll get into the details of that in a bit. After you've acquired the data off of it, make sure that you hash that data to maintain the integrity of the evidence. Data acquisition techniques. Now, I have a problem here. And that problem is the EC Council says brute force the password. And I say, no, 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 don't do that. Why? Here's why. PIN keyed in 3, 4, 5, 10 times. You're going to lock out the phone, and you may get it to a point where if this is part of an enterprise, you may get the phone in a state where it actually sends a signal back to, if it's a BlackBerry, a BES server. iPhones have their own enterprise configuration tools that go with this. Those signals may be sent up, and what may happen is it may automatically wipe that phone at that moment in time. So do not brute force. Okay, so what's the opposite of brute force? You can ask. You can ask somebody. You could ask them for their PIN. You could say, I need to look at your phone. See if they'll let you. I mean, hey, if there's no harm in asking, if they don't give you that information, you're going to have to do something, not brute forcing. You're going to have to do something to get to the information anyway. The worst case is, definitely don't brute force. The worst case at this point is go to the manufacturer default settings. There are some times where you can go to the manufacturer default settings without erasing the data on the phone so that you can actually get into it. It depends on the device. I will tell you right now that there are 4 really great books, some are free and some are paid, on iPhone forensics at this point in time, just dedicated to that whole process. I think the one for Andrew, and his last name starts with an H, it's in one of my slides, I think his is the best because it's an open source document and he also has a book as well. The other thing that you can do with data acquisition techniques for these physical phones is something that you can only do in your lab, and that's physical memory chip extraction. They call it chipping off, and literally what you're doing is you're going into the device, you're disassembling the device, you're finding the RAM, ROM chips or the physical hard drives, and you're actually plucking them from the device. This requires a great deal of physical skill and understanding of how the phones are designed. If I was looking for my first forensics data acquisition person to do this with me in mobile devices, I would go to a phone repair store and find that person there. They probably know how to do all of this, and that might be a great proving ground to bring some people into your organization and then train them as forensics people for your mobile devices. Worst case here, even worse than that, is if you can't get into the phone, there may be an exploit available against the phone where you can actually exploit it so that it will cough up its information. Again, this is not a forensic technique, but you're at a point now where you realize that this device has a key critical piece of information on it that you can't get to, and you're going to destroy all the other evidence to get that one piece that then will allow you to take steps in your investigation. I don't know what that is. That is very situational, and law enforcement's got a better understanding of when we just want that number and then we don't care about the rest of this, when we're not going to present this in a court of law except for to say, we got this phone number off of there, it was the last number dialed, or it was 10 numbers ago, and we went and we found that number and that led us to something else. So when we got that information, we used it to further our investigation, but we can't use the rest of the information on here because we've destroyed it. That balancing act is something that law enforcement can do. If you are law enforcement, you know that. If you're not, you're probably not going to deal with mobile forensics. That's the data acquisition techniques. We've still got a little bit more to cover when it comes to the total forensics process and our 8 steps.